Hello, friends, and thanks very much for tuning in to today's episode. I have got the one and only Wizard of Oz appearing on today's episode. He is the co-organizer behind the Bitcoin Bush Bash. The Bush Bash, if you're not familiar, is Australia's triannual Bitcoin event held in remote parts of the country. It's a no KYC, no registration event where Bitcoiners gather from around the country to debate ideas, discuss things. There'll be presentations, there'll be stake, there'll be plenty of socializing. It's free and it's open to all, much like Bitcoin. There's no expectations on you in terms of how much or how little you participate. It's really up to you and what you want to make of it. What I can tell you is that by attending a Bitcoin Bush Bash, you are likely to meet some of the most insightful and interesting people that you've ever come across. I know for me, it was one of the most important things in my Bitcoin journey that not only deepened my conviction in Bitcoin as an asset class, but in the Bitcoin culture and community as a whole. I found myself having some of the best conversations I've ever had, and I am so stoked for the next one. It's coming up on the 27th of July. It's being held in Palm Cove. Head on over to bitcoinbushbash.info for more information and make a trip of it. Today's episode, as I say, is with the Wizard of Oz, and we spoke about all things Bitcoin, Bitcoin versus crypto, decentralization as a matter of principle, nation state adoption, the Lightning Network. We got into all sorts of other things like politics, and I'm just going to leave it at that because I'll tell you what, you're really going to enjoy it. Before I go, the last thing I'll mention is that the sound on this one is somewhat subpar because it was an in-person interview held at my own home and the acoustics are dubious to say the least. So I'm pretty confident though you're going to be able to overlook the poor sound quality because the signal and the value that you'll get from today's episode is second to none. Not because of me, but because of my guests. So with that said, I hope you enjoy.
Which one's the best crypto asset? Well, Bitcoin's the best crypto asset. Okay. What's the second best? There is no second best. There is no second best crypto asset.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Why Bitcoin Show. I'm your host, Dale Warburton. It's a weekly podcast on why Bitcoin matters and what makes it completely different to all other cryptocurrencies. If you're interested in Bitcoin and you'd like to distill crypto fact from fiction, you've come to the right place.
Let's go.
Let's fucking go.
Let's do this. All right. So I've got the wonderful Wizard of Oz here at Casa del Warburton, the first in-person interview at my humble abode. Thank you, sir, for coming through. Very pleased to have you here.
Delighted to be here, Dale. You totally doxed me out. As an old friend of mine says, I'm discreet. It's just the people I tell aren't.
Exactly. So, I thought sometimes I like to do this at the beginning of a pod, just kind of share my initial impression and or experience with you. And like I say, when I first came up with this idea to do a pod, I remember coming up to you at Bitcoin Alive, and I was I was in VIP, so I was in the plebe section, and I saw the all the VIPs over there, and I tried to touch base with you over the course of the day, and I was like, Wes, I've got something important to talk to you about. And you're like, okay, cool, we'll chat. And then eventually I'm like, come across here. And I try to get across through to the VIP section, but I was politely told, this is not for you. So you came across to my wall in the flav section, and I said, Wes, I've got a show. This is the idea. Okay. It's called the Why Bitcoin Not Crypto Show. Here's the story. I want people to understand why Bitcoin matters and what the problem with crypto is. I want to be the bridge between normies and the Bitcoin world. I want to explain to them how crypto is not even in the same game. I said, would you like to be a guest? And you're like, I would love to be a guest. And he goes, can I give you one suggestion? So you said, drop the no crypto. And at the time I was like, oh God, suggestions. Oh, I've got to listen to all these suggestions. And then eventually I triangulated that point with a few others. And guess what? It's called the Why Bitcoin Show. We dropped the no crypto. And so, appreciate that. And really looking forward to having a chinwag today about all things Bitcoin.
Fantastic. Thanks. Yeah. I wouldn't say I was in the VIP section. it was where they segregated the speakers. We're all a bit special, so
Fair enough.
maybe we don't play well enough.
Yes. All right. So I think let's begin. I mean, some people know you fairly well. You've been around the block. I regard you as a bit of a Bitcoin elder, a wise Bitcoin elder, if you like. But perhaps if you won't mind just sharing a little bit about your sort of origin story, kind of who you are, just how do you describe yourself and how you came across Bitcoin?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Noel. Yeah, so my background's in software. I studied software in high school. Then I found out that you could do a university degree and there were jobs and you could get paid for doing this stuff. And I still enjoy doing that stuff today. So I spent a long time working in enterprise scale software, the big stuff, the stuff that runs government departments, insurance companies, banks, airlines, logistics, large and complicated. And so I had a technical background. Started, I guess, my first touch point for Bitcoin, and like a lot of Bitcoiners will tell you, there were 3 touch points. And the first one was probably reading the Wired article in 2010, 2011. Interesting, but I was in IT. I knew you could digitally copy things, so it wasn't going to go anywhere. Didn't pay attention, didn't read the white paper. About a year or 2 later, a close friend was mining Bitcoin on the GPU. Again, yeah, nice science project, but you can just copy digital stuff. I think in about 2015 or 16, I remember reading about Ethereum and the DAO. The DAO I thought was particularly interesting, the idea of making decisions outside of state control. But then it was really the number go up in 2017. For a combination of reasons, I had a look and started buying some Bitcoin. Didn't only buy Bitcoin, managed to buy half a dozen other shit coins. And it took me about a year to figure out that Bitcoin was the only thing that mattered. And all of my success in life has come from being focused on a small number of things. And so once I'd figured out that all of crypto was just noise and Bitcoin was the only signal, that really resonated with me. And so at that point, I just dumped all my crypto for Bitcoin and got more serious about Bitcoin. I was reading about Bitcoin technically, listening, mainlining podcasts, learning everything. So yeah, that's kind of my journey to get there.
I love the focus element. I'm not sure if you listened to that podcast recently with Peter McCormick. No, it wasn't. So it was with Saylor. Yes, it was McCormick and Saylor, and McCormick had his kid there, and he had these 10 rules for life, and one of the most important was focus. And I just, when I heard that, it just resonated big time, because I've tended to sort of have a look at all different things and spread myself too thin. And actually, what I realized is focus is a superpower. And in the context of Bitcoin, I guess you just honed in and saw that this is what matters. But I think generally this is a principle in life. Like if you kind of spread yourself too thin, you're unlikely to enjoy success in any particular area.
Yeah, which is not to say I don't pay attention to a lot of things. I read fairly broadly, but in terms of developing any degree of excellence, I think you need to focus.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so I think because of the nature of the show being what it is, I always like to get my guests to explain from their perspective why Bitcoin and not crypto. I've got my own views, but what I've been really fascinated to hear is all the different takes from all the different people I've interviewed. Love to hear your take on what makes crypto different and why you actually choose to focus on Bitcoin only, and why you call them shitcoins in the first place. Because I think there's the clue.
Yeah, I guess a lot of Bitcoiners will get to the point of recognizing that Bitcoin is fundamentally different to crypto / the blockchain industry / shitcoins. End up nailing it as shitcoins, which is a little bit rough on the language front, but
is what it is.
We'd also argue that it's completely accurate.
Yeah,
I guess it comes back to security and value. So that's how I arrived at it. So any blockchain that wants to be successful will need to accrue value and utility over time. So as it accrues that utility for whatever the nominated purpose is, it will accrue value. As soon as it accrues value, it needs to be protected, it needs to be secure. Ergo, anything that's going to accrue value must be secure. What's the most secure? Bitcoin, by orders of magnitude. Now, Bitcoin's not trying to put mangoes on the blockchain. It's not trying to.
It really should.
It's the right colour.
Yeah.
That's about similar. So it's trying to be, or it is potentially based global, and that means lots of different things to lots of different people. So that's going to accrue a very large amount of value, and we saw in the last book run that for the first time, Bitcoin went through a US dollar $1 trillion market cap. So that was at the point where a lot of institutional investors sort of woke up and went, oh, it's still not dead. Oh, it's $1 trillion. Oh, maybe we better start actually, paying some attention. But with that sort of value and interest, it can only survive if it's secure. To be base global money, it will be attacked from every vector, as it has been from day one. And those attacks are growing in strength and imagination, and Bitcoin will either survive or it won't. If it survives, and it has done very well to date, and I believe will continue to do well, I believe we've passed the tipping point, the inflection point, where Bitcoin becoming basic global money is inevitable. Inevitable is probably a little bit too harsh, but a little bit too optimistic. That implies that there are no challenges and that there is no risk of failure, and there certainly is. But so that's really where I got to. So Bitcoin is the most secure. Bitcoin optimizes for security above everything else, and decentralization is part of that security. All the other blockchains make different trade-offs, and that's fine. Some of them are great science experiments, and some of the experimentation happening on other blockchains will end up in Bitcoin, or may end up in Bitcoin, if they're sufficiently valuable. We see little examples of that or reflections of that in things like Liquid. So Liquid is a side chain of Bitcoin. It has confidential transactions. So if I send you Liquid Bitcoin, you know how much I've sent you, I know how much I've sent you. But if we go to mempool.space, look at Liquid blockchain and pull up the transaction, we can see it went from address A to address B, but we can't see the asset that was sent. So we don't know whether I was sending you Tether on Liquid or Bitcoin on.
Oh, okay.
And we don't know whether I sent you 1 Satoshi or 100 million Satoshis. So, but then that comes with the trade-off.
Yeah.
And the trade-off is verifiability at the base layer. So that's not a trade-off that Bitcoin, I believe, will ever accept. Will never accept the stepping back from the ability to verify 21. But the experimentation that's happening on things related to Bitcoin is very valuable for Bitcoin.
Okay.
So yeah, a bit of a long-winded answer.
Yeah, but that makes sense.
At the end of the day, for global money, Bitcoin is the only thing that matters. Everything else is a sideshow. Bitcoin has no central authority. Everything else does. It has a group of VCs funding it. It has a marketing team. It has a CEO. It has a white paper or a brown paper.
Or toilet paper. So what, are you sympathetic to the view that folks like JP have articulated, which is more or less, he used the term, blockchain is just an idiosyncratic database structure. It's really slow, it's really inefficient, and it's not good for very much at all because of all those qualities. The only thing it's good for is money. It actually was invented in the 90s. And so much of what we see on crypto today is sort of solutionism, solutions in search of some sort of problem. Is that something that resonates with you, or is that perhaps is that just one characterization of like potentially many?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
To use, I guess, a more general analogy, if we think about running a project, and it doesn't matter whether it's building a house or building an extension to a house, or a software project or anything basically, there's a trilemma. You can have it It's time, cost, and quality. So you can have it fast and you can have it cheap, but you can't have quality. You can have it fast and you can have high quality, but it will come at high cost. So with a trilemma, you can have any two, but you're going to have to sacrifice at least one.
Yeah.
With blockchain, Bitcoin unashamedly makes the selection of security as the primary objective.
Yeah.
Having done that, then the cost of running the blockchain and the speed at which it operates, they are the trade-offs.
Sure. And so what we hear is, and I watched a clip this morning that triggered me a bit, was former OC actor Ben McKenzie. I don't know if you've seen him. Ryan from the OC, Marissa's boyfriend. This is something that perhaps in my generation we watched in our youth. But he's now all over CNBC talking smack about Bitcoin. And one of his talking points is, oh, Bitcoin only does 3 to 7 transactions per second. That's never going to scale. So I think that sort of is a nice segue into Lightning. Lightning is something that that I tend to explain to normies as being something that is inevitably going to compete with Visa. You can send value across the internet at the speed of light virtually for free. I know there are trade-offs around it. I know that in terms of it doesn't work in the sense that it's not done on chain, that you've got channels, it requires channel balancing, all sorts of things like that. Perhaps if you can give us the TLDR on Lightning and any challenges that you foresee in the future that would prohibit it or hold it back from becoming a real challenger to the likes of Visa. Because what I'm imagining and what I've heard is a situation where you've got the ability through the use of derivatives to use Lightning and stable sats to effectively send value across the world instantaneously for free, and you're not exposed to that volatility. Because I think that's the main objection that people say, oh, I don't want this money because literally, overnight it could drop in value by 5%.
Yeah, so
there's a lot there.
Yeah,
yeah,
there is a lot there. Yeah. So I'm just going to start with a little bit of pushback on transactions per second. Bitcoin processes 0 transactions per second.
Okay,
0.
Let's hear that.
So Bitcoin on average processes 2,000 to 3,000 transactions per 10 minutes. So we can round that up to an hourly rate. So we can say that's 15,000 transactions an hour. What we can't do is divide it back to seconds. It's a ridiculous idea. So you can't have a partially confirmed block. The block's either mined or it's not mined. The blocks come every 10 minutes and they have for, plus or minus a little bit, which the difficulty adjustment resolves every 2 weeks. So we've had blocks every 10 minutes for 15 years now. What we haven't had is blocks every second, nor will we ever have blocks every second.
That's a great assessment. I haven't heard that before.
So that's the first point. So what they're trying to do is say Bitcoin and the base layer can process 15,000 transactions an hour. Comparatively, how many can Visa or MasterCard or American Express or Diners Club? Well, I guess we're looking at the legacy financial
Yes.
So they can obviously process orders of magnitude faster. And that comes back to how does Bitcoin scale? And that's a conversation that's been going on within weeks of the white paper being announced and within weeks of the software originally being released on the 3rd of January 2009. So straight away, people were looking at it going, how's it going to scale? And that conversation is still going on today, and I hope that it's going to continue to go on because we'll try lots and lots of different things. For those who are newer to Bitcoin, reading the Block Size Wars is a good background read on that, and in particular to the fork of Bcash in August 2017, and then more importantly to the No 2X capitulation from the New York Agreement, where a bunch of prominent Bitcoiners and Bitcoin companies wanted to force a block size increase. The reason that was so contentious was because they wanted to do what Ethereum is trying to do, which is let's do everything on the base layer. But as any half-competent engineer knows, and we can see lots of examples in nature, things scale in layers, and that's what Bitcoin's now doing. So the base layer, yep, still happily plodding along with 15,000 transactions an hour, plus or minus a few. But faster transactions, well, we can do those on Lightning. Now, Lightning comes with some trade-offs. Bitcoin, I can give you an address, and in 10 years' time, you can send Bitcoin to that address, and as long as I haven't lost the keys, then happy days, I'll have the Bitcoin. With Lightning, it works on invoices. So I can give you an invoice, you can pay the invoice. If you want to pay that invoice again, because, hey, for reason, you can't. So Lightning has a different way of operating. You don't need to run a Bitcoin node in order to receive Bitcoin, but I guess to some extent you don't need to for Lightning either, but your Lightning capability is dependent on infrastructure that must be online. So if the Lightning node is not running, then you can't receive Lightning. If you don't have your Bitcoin wallet open, your base layer Bitcoin wallet open, you can still receive Bitcoin. So there's different trade-offs, mate. Now, Lightning is part of Bitcoin scaling because, as you said, it enables incredibly fast, near free transactions. And there's been dramatic increase in adoption. I first started using Lightning about late 2018. It was still very reckless. There was less than 100 Bitcoin on the whole of the Lightning network at that point. It was quite flaky, but it was so exciting. And for me, I felt I was really late to Bitcoin. And so Lightning is something new. That was something that I could get my teeth into.
Yeah.
So it was very exciting. And it still interests me and fascinates me. And then throughout 2018, 2019, 20, and through to 23 now, Lightning's grown and matured, and there's around about 5,000 Bitcoin on the publicly viewable channels. Private channels probably have, I would suggest, the same level in. So maybe another 5,000. And that's being used. You can already see major exchanges like River Financial in the US, Bitfinex and others, and a bunch of Australian exchanges too. Amber, Bitteroo, both have Lightning adoption, so you can send sats into the exchange to sell if you needed to. Equally, if you are stacking sats, you can withdraw that on the Lightning network. So instant, fast, cheap, fantastic. But to use Lightning, you need to create a channel. So if we're going to do it in the sovereign manner, if you're running a Lightning node and I'm running a Lightning node, and we both want to run that node and create a Lightning channel to other nodes, then we need an on-chain transaction. So that on-chain transaction to onboard all of the people on the planet would take many, many decades on all of the transaction taken. So then you start to get into custodial solutions. So here in Brisbane, we're blessed with a lot of Bitcoin companies, one of which is Wallet Satoshi. And so they have what is probably the easiest to use Lightning wallet, widely used, but it's custodial. So trade-offs there, you and I can use Wallet Satoshi, and I do use Wallet Satoshi. I have a small amount on there, but I also run my own Lightning node and use that in preference. But sometimes, if my Lightning node is down, there's a power outage at my house, or the internet is down, or the node jams up for whatever reason, as it tended to do more in the early days than now, it's quite reliable, then I've always got a fallback. But from a scaling perspective, the custodial solution allows more people to use capability with the trade-off that the custodian can rug pull. Now, that doesn't mean the custodian is a bad actor, but a custodian is a central point of failure. And as Nick Szabo pointed out, those centralizations are security risks. So they can be leaned on by government or by the state, told to shut down and forced to give that money over. Now that's obviously an extreme example. In a lot of Western democracies, we're blessed with reasonably strong rule of law, and whilst we've seen plenty of egregious bending of that over the last few years, that broadly still holds true compared to many other places.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've seen in the last while, in particular, the Australian banks, particularly the big four, there seems to be, and this is just me putting on my tinfoil hat here, there seems to be some sort of coordinated stuff happening in the background. People are having deposits to certain exchanges blocked because they are so-called fraudulent. Happen to be shitcoin casinos, so I'm not altogether that sympathetic to them. But it still fundamentally is like, okay, this is another signal that it's not actually your money when it's in the bank, and even your money in the bank is a custodial risk at the end of the day, and that the only way to truly own your own money is to hold your own keys. And any solution within Bitcoin, whether it's Lightning, whether it's on chain, that relies on a third party, whether it's a collaborative custody model, or whether it's literally sitting on exchange, you're fundamentally able to trust someone. And I've just found that 99% of people don't trust themselves enough, and they want to trust someone. We always have to trust someone in a sense.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm any wiser though, but I'm definitely older than you.
Yes. I think you're wiser too, man.
and I look at a lot of the younger Bitcoiners, and I'm very jealous because I discovered Bitcoin later in life, and Bitcoin takes you down a lot of rabbit holes. But I guess one of the most confronting ones is to start to understand how money in the existing financial system works. And so it is quite confronting to actually understand that, the money that the bank holds for you, there are all sorts of legal mechanisms for them not to give that to you. So the easy illustration of that is, let's say you've saved up, you're saving for a deposit on a house, and you've saved up $20,000, and you decide you want to change banks. You want to walk into the bank and you want to withdraw it in cash. The bank's not going to give it to you. They'll give you a bank check. They'll allow you to transfer it to some other bank. They'll want lots of KYC. They'll want additional documentation. Yeah, that's been quite confronting. And so the idea or the concept of bearer assets and money as a bearer asset is not a commonly understood one, because we don't really think about money much. Nor should we have to. But the default in the existing system is it's all custodial except for cash.
Yeah.
Cash is a bearer instrument. So if I pull $20 out of my wallet, pay you $20 for this excellent cup of coffee, you will go, yeah, score.
Yeah.
But the person who holds the $20 note is the owner of the $20 note by definition.
Yeah.
Same with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a digital bearer asset. So if I hold the private key to that piece of Bitcoin or Bitcoins, shout out Matt O'Dell, my private keys to my Bitcoin, or Bitcoins, then by definition I own the Bitcoins, which there's a whole other rabbit hole there, the concept of property ownership. And there are others who are a better place to talk about.
Totally. I know Kai did a great talk at one of the most recent Bush Bash just about property rights and just having a look at the different types of asset classes and saying Bitcoin fundamentally is the most strongest form of property ownership, because otherwise, I mean, effectively it comes down to a sort of cryptographically, mathematically driven set of rules that are unchangeable, as opposed to a set of rules driven by human beings. And so, the house that we're standing in here, great, if one owns it, that's lucky. But if you live in a third world country, they can come and expropriate it if you happen to belong to the wrong crew, if you're in the wrong political party. And so we happen to live in a place where there's some strong property rights, so that's, yay. But I'm starting to see more and more, and I say normies because I guess non-Bitcoin people start to sort of see like, hold on, like, why is my bank not letting me make deposits to this crypto exchange? I literally a couple of days ago got one from, I don't know if it was NAB or ANZ or someone like that, but it was just like, yeah, we're blocking. And there was no specific mention of the ones that were problematic. And it was quite evident that they hadn't done any sort of due diligence in the sense of being able to say, well, this is clearly a scam. So it's not as if there's someone in that department, in the risk management team going, these are the problematic ones because we've identified there's a scam. They're basically saying like we know better how to deal with your money than you do. And another part of me goes, actually, is it because they know that once the money goes there, it's not coming back? Like I don't go back and then sell my Bitcoin.
So I'm a big believer in Hanlon's razor. And Hanlon's
razor, remind us of that one.
Hanlon's razor is never ascribed to malice, that which can be suitably claimed by incompetence.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, banks definitely don't understand Bitcoin. They have no incentive to, and it's not their core business. Their core business is running their bank in accordance with the legislation, maximising their profits, etc., etc., etc. So looking at it from a pure banking operational perspective, they take a hit when fraud comes to play.
Mm-hmm.
So the broader crypto exchanges, as distinct from Bitcoin-only exchanges, and we're blessed with a number of them here in Australia. So we've got Amber, Bitteroo, Hardblock, PayBTC,
Fast Bitcoins, I think.
Fast Bitcoins, all places where you can go buy Bitcoin and there's no other distraction. There's learning materials available. And I've transferred dollars onto all of those without any friction from the bank, and including in the last couple of days.
Okay.
Even from banks that have said, yeah, we're going to start blocking. So I suspect they are blocking, and I suspect they've got a block list, and they are probably the shitcoin casinos, but they're not going to open themselves to litigation by saying we're blocking the following companies.
Yeah.
Because that would expose them to risk. So they put the broad statement. That may be a charitable explanation, but it's also a credible one when you view it from the bank's perspective. What are they trying to do? What costs them? When someone defrauds you and you contact the bank makes you whole, or should, and that comes out of their profits. They will then try and recover that from an exchange, and the exchange may or may not play ball, but the cost of doing that, just in time and effort and support, is not insubstantial. So for exchanges that don't have those high chargebacks and don't have those significant quantities of fraud, they will probably continue to have fairly frictionless banking relationships. The exchanges that have very high chargebacks and are responsible for large portions of that fraud are likely to face debanking, and we've seen that happen in the last few months in Australia.
Yeah, and that's why I call you a Bitcoin elder, because sometimes the youthful side of us, we kind of go, fuck the banks, they're all up against us, they just create money out of thin air, and they're corrupt and all these kind of things. And Wiz comes in and goes, oh look, you're a bank, you're running a business, you don't want to deal with all the drama, all the chargebacks, and and just the operational overheads associated with that. So that makes sense. One of my things that I think is probably going to happen in the next 5 years, and this sort of can take us down a slightly different path, is I've said quite a few times that I think when it comes to the banks, when I think of pension funds, super funds, I think of fund managers, investment managers, family offices. Right now, there's the sort of career risk to be touching Bitcoin. You've got to be, you don't really want to be associated with this thing. I think in the future, it's going to be kind of a career risk not to. And so you're going to see, I suspect, all the funds, whether it's pension funds, investment managers, and the banks themselves actually embrace Bitcoin. And I see a future where you've got your sort of checking account, you've got your, you've got your saving account, your transactional account, and those are in fiat. And then you'll have like a Bitcoin account. Because I think what we saw during the last bull run was, and people just, and these sort of greed and fear cycles, people just, their money flows out of the bank, and people are seeing, oh shit, this money's not coming back, because especially with Bitcoin's value proposition. So what they might say is, look, let's partner up with, as CBA did at some point, I think they sort of pulled the plug quietly, but let's partner up with a trusted third party, and that happens to be Gemini. And you know what, we're going to offer that now. So it's baked into your app, and you can go, here's my Bitcoin balance and then my fiat balance. And in that sense, they're still able to keep a degree of control. I mean, do you see that as being future with all of these
traditional financial institutions embracing Bitcoin in the future in that manner?
Yeah, so a few things there. So I wouldn't be giving banks a free pass. I mean, I don't think they're good actors generally. They have a long and significant rap sheet on money laundering and nefarious activities for which they have been sanctioned by the state for many hundreds of billions of dollars. Yet it is the customers that they nominally say are the ones at risk. Usually it's actually the bank's behaviour themselves. So no free pass there.
Yeah.
To the issue of a broader clampdown on Bitcoin specifically, but crypto more generally, I think we can see evidence of choke point 2.0. For those listeners who don't know about choke point, it was a financial oppression implemented under the Obama administration in the US to make it exceptionally difficult for people in prostitution, arms,
Gambling, cannabis,
marijuana, gambling to get banking services. So none of those things were illegal, but they made them pseudo-illegal by choking off access to banking. Canadian truckers was a very clear illustration to people recently where that same type of the use of finance as a weapon was brought home very clearly. Now, that wasn't just the Bank of International Settlements saying to Russia, you can't have the money that you've got in the bank. This was an individual sovereign government saying to individual people who had freely contributed a donation to a cause that they believed in, non-violent act, then being sanctioned by the state and being threatened with debanking. And that was a big wake-up. Canada is a member of the G20, ostensibly a Western democracy with a reasonable rule of law. That was clearly thrown into what
Yeah.
So yeah, banking at the moment doesn't embrace Bitcoin. I believe we're past that tipping point where Bitcoin will become base global money. Whether that happens in my lifetime, your lifetime, children's lifetime, or my grandchildren's lifetime, I don't know. But hell, I'm here for the ride.
Yes.
and I think we're both here to contribute to helping them along in some way, shape, or form. These conversations, meetups, and books, and other ways of communicating and teaching and learning are really helpful. Recently, Blackrock, who is the world's largest fund manager, applied for it's popularly been called a spot ETF in the US. It's actually more akin to a trust, and Alan Farrington has a great article that breaks down the difference between through ETFs and trusts which can be traded on the exchange. And I believe the article is actually called Trust Me Bro.
Okay, I've seen it in Click. Okay, got it. Okay.
It's well worth reading. Guy Swan, who's also an incredible resource for Bitcoiners who are keen to learn, also reads that article, and Guy often adds a nice take at the end of his pieces. So he reads Alan Farrington's piece. Probably the most important thing that's come out of BlackRock's application, from my perspective, is not whether it succeeds or fails, although their 575 to 1 success to failure rate would kind of indicate that they're fairly confident. But when the head of BlackRock rolls up on CNBC and says, Bitcoin is here to stay, Bitcoin is digital gold, Bitcoin ain't going away, he is doing exactly what you said. He is de-risking serious finance professionals in the existing financial system from talking about Bitcoin, from proposing Bitcoin be part of a fund structure, for putting forward options that perhaps Bitcoin should have an allocation within our fund, within our institution, within our family office, within our family. And so that, over the course of time, starts to break down those initial, it's scary, crypto is a nightmare. Yes, correct, crypto is a nightmare. And that's why that distinction between crypto and Bitcoin is both accurate and important. You don't see BlackRock saying, yeah, we're proposing a shitcoin ETF and a Bitcoin ETF. Nor are they talking about digital assets, nor are they talking about blockchain. They're only talking about Bitcoin. There's a reason for that.
Yeah, there's the signal, isn't it? And I've said, people, I guess they listen to me are going to go, oh, this boy repeats himself. But I've said quite a few times, like, I think of BlackRock as kind of an extension of the federal government, in the sense that there's this sort of revolving door between, the Fed, Treasury, and then these monster financial institutions, Fidelity, BlackRock, whoever they may be. And, whether it's Janet or Jerome or whoever, they all just kind of keep going round and round. And eventually they collect a pension on the taxpayers' bar. But I've said, like, there's no chance that Larry Fink is going to put his neck out there to get embarrassed. There are definitely conversations that were had, no question on mind, that, hey, listen, what do we need to do to get this through? Or like, what are the prospects of this going through? I know that there are so many different other ETFs. And the other thing I also, and you said, like, there's that distinction, and that's interesting, because I must check into it. But the other thing that I've also thought about is the tendency, as I understand, with these ETFs is it's the first mover actually, swallows 80% of the market, and then the balance kind of pick up the scraps. And so I think there's a gold ETF as an example. I'm not sure what the ticker symbol is, but that one, when it was launched,
it was GLD.
GLD, there we go.
And it was launched by
BlackRock.
iShares, which is owned by BlackRock.
So that particular one, when it was launched, it was one of the fastest adopted ETFs of all time. I think it still is. And the reality is that there's a bunch of other gold-backed ETFs, but they just don't have anywhere near the sort of market cap. So one wonders how the SEC is going to sort through the plentiful applications, whether it's the Grayscale trusts now wanting to convert, and they're suing them for that. Then you've got everything from Gemini through to ARK through to Fidelity. It's going to be really interesting to see what the order of these things happens and how quickly the market adopts them. So I guess the difference being, though, at the end of the day, from our perspective, not your keys, not your coins. As I understand, we've also got these surveillance sharing agreements that was a condition of the ETF. So again, if privacy is important to you, or if being able to sort of hop across the border at your own will and basically own your own money is important to you, then you're not going to touch that. But if you're an institution and you want to make an allocation, you want something that's liquid and gives you exposure, it's brilliant. And then number go up, and then I think nobody doesn't like number go up.
Yeah, I mean, Giacomo Zucco has a lovely talk, which he was kind enough to give at Noob Day up in Honey Badger last year, and gave it unconfiscatable in Vegas the year before. But he makes the point that the number go up tribe and the privacy crowd are actually, they appear to be in conflict, but in reality, they're tied together. They're tied at the hip. Having number go up does not mean Bitcoin is going to succeed if you can't transact privately. The ability to transact privately does not mean that Bitcoin will succeed unless number also goes up. So the two things have to exist together. And if they continue to exist together, then Bitcoin has a good chance of success. But either by themselves will cause Bitcoin to fail. If there is no privacy in Bitcoin, if there is no ability to transact anonymously, as there is with cash, then Bitcoin will fail. Equally, if the only thing you can do is transact privately with Bitcoin, kind of like Monero's transaction ability to transact privately is fairly good, but very, very small group. Yeah. So that in itself has all sorts of problems with it. And then the legs in and out of them.
Yeah, it's very hard. I mean, I'm not aware of any exchanges that support them too.
Yeah, and why do you think that is?
Yeah.
So for Bitcoin to succeed, both of those things must be true. So the ETFs will most likely drive some degree of number go up. And therefore, they actually put the privacy piece at risk because ETFs, by definition, are custodial. Now, for investment funds, pension funds, they're probably by mandate and law prevented from owning the underlying asset. And that's by design. So if you're a pension fund, you don't go and specifically manage the MLC tower that your pension fund owns in Sydney. No. You have shares in a property trust or units in a property trust. Property trust owns the MLC building. They have a bunch of lawyers that look after that. They have property managers that manage the building.
Mm-hmm.
They will have people that deal with the leasing of the floors, the layout of the retail areas, etc., etc., etc. So you, as a fund manager, you don't have any of that operational insight, control, and that means that from a fund member's perspective, you're less likely to be able to do nefarious things with your fund members' money. Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, if you as the fund manager are holding ETF units in a Bitcoin spot ETF that is tracking Bitcoin price, then you're getting custody dealt with, tax reporting dealt with, and you know exactly, you've got full visibility to what's going on. Compare that to your fund owning 1,000 Bitcoin and you holding that 1,000 Bitcoin. Now all your members are going, don't really get on a plane with those 12 words and fly off to somewhere, shave his beard off.
Yes, totally. I understand what you mean.
So ETFs have a space for institutions, but for individuals, and this is one of the things I love, is we've been able to front run Blackrock. Fuck me, how good is that?
Exactly.
These guys have got to queue up behind us plebs to get a slice of Bitcoin.
Totally.
Stand in line, bitch.
Yes, exactly.
So
I love it. Yeah.
Not your keys, not your coins.
Yeah.
There's a reason why that is just so widely spoken. Bitcoin.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And that's the most important piece. And I think, when we look at all the different sort of moving parts of Bitcoin, I think that is one of the key things I've drum home. And really glad that we're having, whether it was the banks that we referred to earlier and all the truckers that we referred to earlier, there are these examples, this marketing that just happens. So it's like guerrilla marketing for Bitcoin where, I'm like, look, it's actually not your money. They'll block transactions. They'll stop you from making cash deposits. They'll do this, do that. It's Bitcoin, totally uncensorable. And I think therein lies potentially one of the strongest value propositions for it, particularly in tyrannical, regimes. We live in you could say somewhat the technocratic surveillance state. You could say that, but it's still free relatively on the scale of things. But there are parts of the world where this technology is fundamentally critical. I'd like to shift gears now away from the heavy hitters of BlackRock and let's talk about the social phenomenon of Bitcoin. We've got a Bitcoin Bush Bash coming up in a few days, actually. So we're going to get this out so that folks can listen to it on the road. But I thought let's just start off with I know you've told this story, so you can give us the sort of the bridge version of the Bush Bash itself, which, as far as I'm aware, is Australia's first real, you could say, I don't want to say organized Bitcoin conference because it's quite organic. So tell us the story there.
Sure. Yeah. So this started in November in 2020. So we'd all been locked down for a while, the start of the COVID pandemic. And I had a good Bitcoiner friend who lived down in Canberra. I was living in Queensland. Queensland had shut their borders, but there was rumours of it being opened in the start of November. And I rang him up and said, I think they're going to open the borders at the end of October. This conversation was at the start of October. He said, I haven't seen you for ages. Let's get together and have a few beers and talk about Bitcoin. And anyway, so we found a spot which he'd been to, Murrurundi, in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales. So it was about halfway between where he lives and where I live. And Bill, a couple of days later, just had registered the domain name, bitcoinbushbash.info. He'd created a little website. He popped on a few accommodation places in Murrurundi and tweeted it out to his vast bank of followers and said, yeah, Wiz and I are going to meet for the weekend and drink beers and talk Bitcoin. All Bitcoiners welcome. Contact me or contact Wiz if you're interested. And then, yeah, DMs just started turning up and like, yeah, this sounds good. And, you know, what do we do about accommodation? And I was like, well, put your big boy pants on, put your big girl pants on, and organise something. Yeah, we didn't organise anything, so it was very much a sort yourself out. And we were lucky in that first year. Obviously everything was very, very quiet. So the hotel that we stayed in happily gave us their back room, back area, which is where we held that first bush bash. And I mean, I've been involved in events over many, over the course of my career. And usually you get people who say they'll turn up, and around about half to 2/3 turn up. Bush Bash has consistently been different. So we had about 20 people said they'd turn up. And on the Saturday lunchtime, I did a head count and it was over 40. And it's been the same every single time. So we don't require registration. You don't have to give your name. You don't even have to talk to anybody. You can just listen. A few people then started messaging saying, so are there going to be any presentations? And I talked about that with Bill, and I thought, oh, yeah, it's a good opportunity to do some education. So I've been playing with a few things. I've been playing with Liquid. I've been playing with Hodl's new, at that time, their new lending platform. I'd played with Tails, and so I just demonstrated some stuff that I'd been playing on. JP from Sydney, who you had on previously, he and Catan brought JP's Blockstream satellite out to Murrurundi.
Wow.
We set it up in the beer garden, and JP and Catan plugged in the node structure, and we used Lightning to send a message across the Lightning network that was broadcast on the Blockstream satellite and received on the satellite dish, which had no internet connection. So everyone was just like, oh, this is real, this is
amazing.
yeah. So it was a great weekend, lots of talking and laughing and sharing and connecting that social way. Because often being a Bitcoiner is a bit contrarian. It upends a lot of generally accepted perceptions, and it can feel a bit lonely. And that weekend was really, really lots and lots of fun. And I think everyone went away and said, well, we're going to do this again, aren't we?
Yeah.
And so we did.
Yeah.
Now, because Victoria was still locked down at the time, we thought, oh, we should do one in Victoria. We'll do it in northern Victoria, so it's not too far from the border in case there's the risk of border closure again.
You've got to make a run.
And we've got to make a run. And then later in the year, we did one in the winter, in the middle of the year, in Queensland, where it's warm and sunny. It's got its own country, as we know, Dale.
Too well, exactly. Don't be fooled by the hoodies. It's 30 degrees outside there.
It's not. I don't think it's even 20. That's why we're not putting it on.
Don't give it away. No.
And I guess the feedback has been really wonderful, and it really emphasised to me that, and many other people talk about this, that ultimately Bitcoin is a social way. So Bitcoin adoption grows because we talk to each other, and then we tell our friends, and sometimes our friends, especially early in our Bitcoin journey, we talk to people, we're somewhat evangelical about it. And later on, I guess my state now is that I tend to let people know that I know a bit about Bitcoin, and to make them welcome to come and ask if they're curious, but I don't ram it down people's throats anymore. Like, I probably did.
I think that it comes with time. I feel like it comes with time because I too have stopped beating on about it because initially you're just so excited and you're just screaming from the rooftops and you realize it's not an effective way to persuade people. And I almost want to use like an analogy of, like when you're a young teenager or maybe you're at uni and you're trying to attract ladies, the guy who's making too hard an effort typically falls flat the most. Like he tries too hard. Yeah. It's the cool cat who doesn't appear as if he cares too much. He gives maybe the girl like a glance or a nod or some sort of suggestion, makes a joke, walks off. That piques her interest. She comes back to him. It's not the guy who's like a little puppy dog following around the dance floor, the bar, or whatever it is. And I'm talking now, this is my early youth, but
and that's an appropriate analogy for the handsomest man. Whereas a curly red-headed nerd, I had very little experience in that. But I think the core point there is actually making people curious.
Yeah.
If there's one thing I've learned is to find what makes people curious, and the little Bitcoin book I think is a nice place to start. And I remember giving that to my parents to read, and the next time I visited them, I said, "Oh, did you read that?" I was talking to my father, and he said, "Yeah, I did. I read it." I said, "So what did you think about it?" And he paused for a minute and said, "Bitcoin's really about the separation of money and state, isn't it?" I was like,
a shrewd fella.
Bingo, Dad. Ultimately, it's absolutely about the separation of money and state because the state has consistently shown itself to be a poor custodian of money over the full course of human history. All of the collapses of major civilizations and structures, as we're observing at the moment, is ultimately because they have used the money, they have debased it, and ultimately that leads to that collapse. I had the same conversation with my mum. Now, my mum didn't have an academic background. My father didn't have economics. My father had. Mum had a background in social welfare and in particular with women fleeing domestic violence and ships. And I asked Mum, did you read that? Yes. What did you think? And she said, Bitcoin's unconfiscatable wealth that you can just take with you. And it was dichotomy between those two perspectives from my parents that just really drove home to me how different people perceive Bitcoin. So the thing that I try and find out is what is it that's going to pique someone's curiosity about it? Because if you can get them curious, then they're off on their own journey. And then they can come to you for, hey, I'm learning about Bitcoin now, and what's a 51% attack? Oh, yeah, it's this.
Exactly. And this is what makes so much of Bitcoin to me feel inevitable, but it's a very dangerous word because, I didn't ever think that COVID was a possibility, frankly. I was like, I never had contemplated or gamed that particular scenario, and my brain is always adversarial. And now I'm like, what's the next one, right? But when it comes to like Bitcoin, I think there is, to an extent, this inevitability because it almost doesn't matter who you are. It actually fixes something for you. So I look, okay, so we're seeing a very polarized world today, and you might say a lot of the cultural decay and the social division and just the inequality and just the like social unrest is potentially linked to the financial system because people are just finding themselves unable to survive. Now, if you find yourself somebody who's politically on the left, traditionally on the left, let's call it, and you care about, I guess, the sort of lower to middle socioeconomic group, they tend to be the most hard hit by inflation. It's not necessarily the asset owner. So it goes, well, here's something that, yes, it's volatile, but if you can understand why it's volatile, you can ride a 4-year cycle. Chances are, I don't think anybody's lost any money over 4 years.
And so not only that, so I did some analysis of this. I got the full price history of Bitcoin on a daily price basis.
Yeah.
There are 0 days in Bitcoin's history so far where if you had held Bitcoin for 4 years, your gain was always above 100%. So it didn't matter whether you bought at the Bitcoin peak or the Bitcoin trough. If you held for 4 years, you were at least 100% up.
There we go.
At least.
So there we go. So that makes that case.
So that is very much about time preference, as we tend to call it Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So it's not something for short-term pumping and dumping and making a quick buck. You're better to go and actually do some work and save. But the key thing I like about, one of the great things I love about Bitcoin is it's optional. It's opt-in. You know, Bitcoin has a bunch of qualities, and we've touched on a few of these throughout this discussion.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is unconfiscatable.
That's something the left should care about too.
It's ungated. So everyone has access to it. That equality of access. Now, it doesn't mean that we all have the same amount of money to put into Bitcoin, to buy Bitcoin. That's a whole different thing. But equality of opportunity is the starting point. So everyone potentially has access to Bitcoin. If you've got Bitcoin, you can transact when and where and with whomever you wish, and no one can stop you. So it's not censorable. It's not seizable, can't be debased. You can determine exactly how many Bitcoin there are. So there are a lot of qualities that the Bitcoin network has. If you like those qualities, you can buy some Bitcoin because those qualities are important to you and they'll protect your savings over time.
Yeah.
If those things are not important to you, that's okay. Walk on by. Walk on by. But if those things are important to you and they're optional, you have to question people who try and deny you access into Bitcoin. Because if it's optional, then why do you care?
Yeah, exactly.
And I use that framing to think about conversations from the state, regulators about, oh, well, we should control access to this or that. Well, really, let's in that framing, let's try and understand that you guys need to be honest about what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. And fortunately, I feel like the state in many countries has overplayed their hand in trying to appeal to the paternal side of people, which is like, you must go and get this jab because we tell you it's great for you and it works and it's effective. It'll stop from spreading. No, it's not going to stop from spreading, but it'll save you. No. And the narrative keeps shifting. And you go, okay, well, sure, I believed you there. And then it's like, well, you also say to them, hey, if the state cares so much about you, then why aren't they like clamping down on like pokies? I mean, pokies are night. Like that's like, and those are the people who can least afford to do it. I mean, if the state really cared about it, or smoking, or what about all the industrial sludge that we call food? Like, you see all the people going and queuing up at McDonald's, and you go like, what are people eating here? So you have all these situations. You're like, when you realize the state doesn't care about you, you're literally you're just a like a cow that can be farmed for tax revenue. Literally, that's how they look at you. And their goal is to extract as much as they can, much like a farmer would, in the form of tax. So you take care of you figure out what's best for you, and don't really appeal to authority for somebody else to look out for your best interests, because you're in the best position to determine that. So I try and touch on a bunch of things. So there's all these different angles. If you care about the climate, go down the path of understanding how Bitcoin mining can actually facilitate the transition to the green energy revolution, if that's what you care about. I mean, we can talk about the merits of whether or not solar and all the mining that needs to happen in order to make those solar panels actually exist is in itself green, but that's a whole nother kettle of fish. But go down that path. You care about freedom and track your money, then go down this path. And if you care about like equality and protection of people's savings, then go down this path. There's all these different touch points, and it's almost like, as you say, you ask the questions, you uncover what matters to that person, kind of leave them with a little piece of information and let them explore. Because force feeding people, like trying to get them to drink from a fire hose, is usually not the way. So my parents are staying with us at the moment. My dad's trad by through and through, value investor, just happy to get his 8% per annum. And he's just looking at the compound growth of the time, just so disciplined. And he's done well. Plus, he's got private equity deals where he can actually add tons of value. So he'll say to me, like, hey, man, we've had some businesses where we've had exits of like, 40x our initial capital because we know how to do that. I can't do that with Bitcoin. I can't control that. So I go, yeah, I respect that. Meet people where they are, but you need to find what matters to that person. And so if there's something in it where you go, hold on, and then they can run on their own. And then, I suppose there's 100 million plus Bitcoiners on Earth. And I feel like as a network, it's just growing and growing in momentum. And the geopolitical, the macro, all of these demographic forces are kind of building. And we're riding a wave. And I'll say something like earlier to what you were saying is like in your lifetime, or maybe your kids' lifetime, your grandkids' lifetime, I'm actually fairly conservative. I've prepared myself mentally for quote unquote war in the sense that I would love hyper-Bitcoinization in the sense of, we got $1 million Bitcoin in 5 years. I mean, then we're styling, then we're financially set and going, got a bit of fuck you money and I don't have to work for the man. I can do what I want. But I'm prepared to do this for decades and decades because I've got a long-term horizon. So,
I think the core of what we're talking about there is really the non-aggression principle. Is you don't have the right to force other people to do things.
Yeah,
you can persuade them. And I think often on a new subject, like Bitcoin often is for most people, is helping make them curious, assists that. But along with that comes free choice. The other half of free choice is consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And from that arises that lovely little saying from a lady on Twitter, Panic FOMO. Everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's perhaps a little harsh, but I'm quite happy if the SEC continues to deny spot ETFs for the rest of the decade, and all of the institutions line up behind us plebs whilst we continue stacking. I think it's far more important to have another billion Bitcoiners than it is to have another billionaire Bitcoin.
Fair point, absolutely. And I was even saying the other day, because we're investigating putting some, setting up a self-managed super and all that jazz, and I'm kind of like, okay, shit, this takes like 3 months to happen. I wouldn't mind if Bitcoin drops to 15. Selfishly, you know what I mean? In a way, like I want some more corn, but I think we're not here just to play Mickey Mouse short-term games. We're here to, I'm looking sort of 20 years, 30 years out. I'd love to be in a situation like what I've said to someone else, and I was on a pod not too recently, and it was actually the part of the pod that wasn't recorded, and at the end she was like, "Oh, I wish you said that on the pod." But I was just basically like, I don't care about money as in I want to buy things. Like I don't need that many things. There's some things that are critical to me: friends, family, obviously security. Got a great partner, love my pets, my family, and all that jazz. But I actually want to do good in the world. And I think what I would like, and when I think of some specific things, I'm going, I would like to do something in Africa in relation to protecting natural habitats and wild reserves, because what tends to happen over time is these things, it's really hard. I mean, I won't go into all the details, but I want to be able to get a little slice of Africa and have that protected just for these magnificent animals that I don't want to see disappear. And I'm going to need some money to do that. And so that's kind of my objective. So I've got 20 years in my horizon, and I'm kind of hopeful that would be the case. But hey, if it takes 30 years, it takes 40 years, look, I've got time as long as I'm healthy.
And taking care of your health is always important. And I think Bitcoiners should think about this because, and I said this the first bush bash in Beechworth in March 2021, is that some of the Bitcoiners there, and possibly some Bitcoiners listening now, will have been in Bitcoin for quite a while, and they will have what new Bitcoiners today would think, wow, gigantic stacks. And in a few years' time, certainly by the end of the decade, anyone who's fortunate enough to own a whole Bitcoin will be in a very small minority. But some people have got multiple Bitcoins, Some have got dozens, hundreds, or possibly even thousands or tens of thousands.
My God.
So this decade is about thinking about the change you want to bring into the world. So that's a very personal thing. And for you, that is finding and protecting a small slice of Africa so that that beautiful, unique habitat with all of the things that encompass remain in perpetuity.
Yeah.
For other people, it's completely different things, and that's good. That's what makes us unique and human. But there is a real propensity in Bitcoin. We criticize the state, the government, stupid things that happen, and that's all good. And we can continue to do that for the rest of the decade. But when we get into the next decade, or maybe the one after, we're going to have the wealth to make change, to make substantive change in the world. And it becomes important and incumbent upon us to make that change, not just to be armchair experts anymore and whinge and bitch about the state of the world. Because if Bitcoin succeeds as we expect it to do, then if you had, let's say you had 10 Bitcoin, and we're now at Sensat parity, so $1 million Bitcoin, well, we're briefly going to be there. But as we get closer to $100 million, which at that point, the US dollar will be a meaningless valuation point. But people who had, say, 10 Bitcoin will have unimaginable wealth. They'll be able to do things that are not imaginable today. You might go, gee, I wish the internet worked a bit faster. Oh, what would you like to do about that? How much would it actually cost to roll fibre out to everyone in your community? And if you did that, what would it enable the community to do?
Exactly.
A little simple example. And maybe that would cost $1 million, a couple of $1 million in today's dollars.
Yeah.
Depends on the size of the community and how far-reaching you want to be.
Yes.
All those sorts of things. But things which are unimaginable options today become options, potentially become options in the future. And the things that we want to do, this comes back to Bitcoin as a social layer. We're all individual. We're all very special as which is why, yeah. So the change that we want to bring into the world all reflects our own individual personalities and things that we'd like to see different in the world.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so funny because it's like, I didn't even have to, my first engagement with Bitcoiners in real life, I mean, that was first in Adelaide, I went to a meetup, but in Queensland was actually Yeppoon. I mean, that was the first time, the first bush bash I went to. I hadn't even gone to a Bitcoin meetup here in Brizzy. And there's almost like this unspoken agreement to what you're kind of describing there. I mean, maybe you'll find the odd Bitcoiner, and I probably hazard a guess that they also shitcoin. They call themselves a Bitcoiner, but they also have some shitcoins where part of what really motivates them is financial gains and being able to get all the like nice gadgets of the day. But I think there's something quite fascinating about, you got people in crypto whose goal is a Ferrari, and people in Bitcoin who are happy to drive the jalopy and be these, like, let's say, imagine Adam Back. I mean, how many Bitcoin does that boy have? And yet he looks like, I mean, I say this with respect, he doesn't dresses like a bit homeless sometimes. Got his backpack, he's got his camo. So modest AF, and you think to yourself, if that was a crypto bro, he's wearing like Armani suit, Armani glasses, he rocks up in his
Richard Hart.
He's a Richard Hart. And so, the dichotomy between the sort of ethics and the culture of crypto versus Bitcoin couldn't be more stark in the way they think about money. I mean, we're almost like the Warren Buffetts of crypto, quote unquote crypto, in the sense that we're not here for like just pure financial gains and things. There's something bigger at play. And so, I mean, therein lies kind of the distinction. And I absolutely love that. I think the last thing I'd like to just touch on before we roll is with this bush bash coming up, we're in, I think it's the first one we're having now in Palm Cove. Do you want to maybe give us some, if you've got any insight as to what people can expect, perhaps those people who are on the fence. I mean, I know accommodations are a bit tight at the moment, but are there any sort of areas that you would say, like, Yeah. What would you say to anyone who's kind of hasn't gone, or what can we expect?
Yeah. Well, everyone always starts by going, "Oh, how many people are coming?" And to which I reply, "Oh, let me just go and check the ticket sales."
Yeah.
There are no ticket sales.
Yeah.
There is no registration. How many do I think will turn up to Palm Cove? 50 or 60, maybe 100 like we got in Beechworth, maybe 200, maybe just be may just be a dozen of us sitting around drinking beers talking about Bitcoin. It'll be a lot of conversation about Bitcoin. There's a dozen or so interesting and diverse speakers from many perspectives on Bitcoin. You can read about those on bitcoinbushbash.info.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess most importantly, you'll get to meet and speak with other Bitcoiners from diverse backgrounds and other parts of Australia, all of whom know something about Bitcoin that you don't, and all of whom will have questions that some of which you will share and some of which will make you stop and think and go, "Ooh, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that."
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the thing. Hey, it's the variety of conversations, the variety of perspectives, and in all of my engagements, at least at the Bush Bash, I can say they've been so good. I've just had like the best conversations. I felt like I was at my wedding at the one. I just was like, my God, I'm running from table to table, and like I'm keyed into what they're saying there. This is good stuff. Okay, let me run across to this table. Whew, okay, that got me thinking. I'm just like, it's just absolutely on cloud nine. So to anyone who sort of hasn't made the pilgrimage, I want to say, is definitely worth a trip. I think there's, you did a pod with Stefan Oliveira on the Bitcoin Bushbash.info site. So I certainly suggest people go and have a listen to that too. And then I'd also say I wrote an article just about kind of what it's all about from a cultural perspective. So if you want to get a flavor of what it's like, yeah, it's really one of the it's one of the best. It's sort of there's proof of work involved. It involves people who truly care about Bitcoin, and so while we're all different, I just get so much value from it, and I'm so pumped, and I'm making a holiday of it. So yeah, really looking forward to it. Anything that you want to leave the listener or the viewer with before we round out today?
No, I don't think so. Thanks, Dale. It's been a lovely conversation. As always, we can keep talking about Bitcoin for another few hours. And,
yes,
and I'm sure we will up in Palm Cove in a couple of weeks' time.
Sounds awesome. Wiz, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. And yeah, to anyone listening, you made it thus far. Congrats. The production quality is going to be. I give it. Yeah, stellar. But I'm going to give it a 5 because we're just working out a few kinks here, and I'm doing it in the house. And but yeah, nice one. All right. Thank you very much, Wiz. Cheers. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and that you got some value out of it. Either way, hit me up on Twitter and let me know what you think. My handle is Dale21M. If you've got any suggestions as to people you think I should be talking to or topics I should address too, I would love that sort of feedback. Otherwise, if you want to support the show, there's a couple different ways you can do that. The first is just to share it amongst your friends and family. The more that people hear the message that Bitcoin and crypto are not the same thing, the better. And I want to help people understand that. The second thing you can do is give me a 5-star review on whichever podcast app you're using. Of course, that's only if I deserve it. And last but not least, if you want to stream sats my way via the Fountain app, I'm not going to say no, but it's not expected. Thank you so much for your support thus far. It means the world to me. I appreciate the hell out of you, and the best is yet to come. Much love, friends. I'll see you on the other side.